All right, welcome back to Granite City Comic Con 2016, where I am now joined by Chris Murray and Phil Vaughan, and they're going to tell us about the comics course that you can study in Dundee. You said you changed the name, so I'm not going to say comics studies. So if you can just go ahead and tell us about what it is you do in the course.
Sure. The comic studies course has been run for about 5 years, quite successfully. But we found over the course of that, there's quite a few students that have been coming to it who really want to kind of get into the comics industry and so on. So we found that the M.Lit designation doesn't quite work for some of them. So we thought that it would be better to have a second route that comes out of it. So we've now expanded it so that it has an MDes designation alongside the M.Lit. So it's now called the Masters in Comics and Graphic Novels, and there's an M.Lit and MDes route out of it. The content in terms of the course, the M.Lit course, is still pretty much the same as it was. Courses on international comics cultures, autobiographics, superhero comics and film, and so on. But we now have a couple of more modules that now form the core of the MDes, which I think Phil can tell you about.
Yeah, I mean, the main motivation behind it, like Chris says, is to have something that's more kind of appealing to someone from maybe an art background or a creative background. So the submission process is slightly different. So it's portfolio based. Examples of sequential comic art. But the outcome of the course is different now as well. So rather than a dissertation, you'll do a creative response. So you'll do a project, you do a major project. But we've also embedded in production modules, and we've enhanced the creating comics module that already exists in the M.Lit.
Okay, so in a way, it's more for people that are coming from, say, the humanities and sort of background. It'll be a continuation into that process, and then, for example, people coming from a background at an art school, it's the same sort of thing with a portfolio review, and just essentially continuing that on to the next stage.
Yeah, but the core modules will be the same.
Will be shared.
Yeah, will be shared. Yeah. So it just gives the student a more kind of options and maybe tailored to more what that student wants to do with their career.
And especially it's good as well in being in Dundee, because Dundee has such a sort of rich comics tradition as well, and it's very convenient that you can kind of pull these resources as well, and as well as that you've got the comic space as well now, which is something being run.
Yeah, that's Dundee Comics Creative Space, which is in the Vision building, which is just next to the campus. A lovely, relatively new building, which we're sharing with. There's game companies in there, and there's Dundee Maker Space and things like that. So we occupy quite a big room in that, so it's really like an aircraft hangar. It's huge, but that's been given to us. That space has been given to us by the people that own the Vision building, because what we're doing is really a social enterprise project, and it's funded by the Rank Foundation. So we're funded for 2 years, and really what we're trying to do is reach out into the local community, bring in children from about the ages of 10 to 17 to work in weekly workshops to create comics, and we're kind of using comics as a way to kind of embed thinking about new ways of creative learning, using comics to think about literature, about history, about local history, and all those things. So we're putting around that some research work that we're doing in comics and education. That's a burgeoning area, and we're very much moving into that. So that we've got a social enterprise aspect of it through Dundee Comics Creative Space. We've also got the research work that feeds into that. We've also got in the space studio at the back. So it's a comic studio which is partly occupied by graduates of the courses and some local comics creators, and the idea there is that they get their space in the studio and the resources of the studio in exchange for helping us out with the workshops that we do with the kids. And the reason we wanted that studio, and we felt that was so important, is there was so many people coming out of the comics courses, and they were wanting to get into the comics industry, but we felt that there was a kind of missing step between studying the comics and getting into the comics industry. And I think that was a place that supported for a while doing some freelance work and doing some work and building up a portfolio to get into the industry. And I think over the last couple of years, we've seen some good success of students coming out of the courses and starting to get work in the industry. And perhaps you could.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting some real traction in Canada, America. Our students are working on titles for DC Comics, Chapter House, projects that were started in Dundee, actually, which is great to see. And I think that's what's really important about what we're doing with the kids in the creative space and what we're doing at the university. It's all about these physical outcomes, whether it's digital comics or physical comics, printed comics. We find that vitally important to what we do. So even the kids, they're producing work that we're going to put out in a sort of anthology that's theirs, and they own it. They're coming up with a name for that. They're designing it. They're producing it. So they're basically taking their stories and taking it right through to publication, much like we do with the students on our master's courses as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's you can teach, but at least you're getting the practical outcome at the end of it as well. So it's developing that skill just a stage further, because like you said, comics is, if we've gathered anything from the panels and things over this weekend, there is no set path. But when there's no set path, you don't know what path to take a lot of the time. And it's good. Like, the recurring thing as well that keeps coming up is you've said community, and with it being something that very much reaches out, because that's what you have to do with comics. It is about getting out there. It is the nature of actually getting out and actually trying to get your work out there, or even just talk to people and connect to people. And that's, as someone who did the comics course, that's something that you get throughout the year generally. Like this, you could look at the schedule and say, okay, this is my class in the week, but the amount of other things that you have that are optional, but if you want to succeed, those options should be taken. And for example, you have functions you have Dundee Comics Day, and you have the actual Comic Cons themselves, and there's loads of opportunities throughout for you to meet creators. I met Grant Morrison in the time I was there. You met Grant Morrison, Chris, and you were very happy about that.
I was very happy. That's one of the things we've been happiest about that we've been able to achieve is that connection to industry. We knew when we started the comics courses that there was obviously going to be a kind of strong academic, scholarly side to it. There was going to be a very strong creative side to it and outputs. We had that, but I think it wouldn't work nearly as well if we didn't have those connections to industry. And obviously that's very much about DC Thomson's. They've been an incredible partner, but it's all the other connections that you make just by going out to cons and meeting people. And often when you approach comics professionals and creators and say to them, would you like to come and talk to some students about your work? They love to. You think it might be a hard sell, but it's actually they're very keen to come and talk to students about their work. There's a certain kind of interaction that you get at a big Comic Con with a creator, which is great. It's good to go up and kind of get something signed and have a chat with them. But it's often quite short and it's often quite controlled. When we get the creators into a classroom or do a workshop, you find over the course of that they kind of open up and they tell you the real stories. You see behind the scenes a little bit, and see behind the curtain. So I think that's important for aspiring comic creators to kind of make those contacts, do that networking, but also kind of have a different relationship with those creators in that kind of space.
I think actually our locations really helped as well, because a lot of these creators, they're big names now, but they've actually started their careers at DC Thomson's in Dundee, whether in the city itself or working remotely and sending their scripts or artwork to DC Thomson. So there's a kind of affection towards Dundee that most of the big creators, their work's sitting in the archive potentially in DC Thomson's, and they've got a lot of time for Dundee. They had a good experience at Dundee, and they're sort of giving something back now to the city. Yeah. And I think we're kind of trying to do what DC Thomson's used to do. They always say that DC Thomson's gave creators an amazing training in the city, and I think we're trying to pick up the mantle of that, I would say. say, you know, and but pushing it onto the next generation.
Yeah, they'll definitely be more keen to go to Dundee than, let's say, Wick. It'll work a lot better. The Wick Comic Con doesn't sound like it'll be a very good draw. You were speaking as well about building towards the practical output, and for example, for a lot of the courses, generally you have an anthology that comes out at the end, but you actually, through Universe, you publish quite a few things from people who've come through the course.
Yeah, Universe is our imprint that we have at the university to publish the students' work, as you say. We have the anthology, which collects the work annually that's come out, but we also have one-off or occasional publications. We have another title called Tales of the Universe. We also I've got a new one that's going to be coming out soon called Masters of Universe, which is more specifically aimed at the master's students. You can see what we're doing there with that title. We're getting a lot of mileage out.
Specifically say how you say it, Masters of Universe.
Yeah, your Masters.
There will be no copyright issue.
No copyright violation. But there's also been things that have come out, such as Cosmic, which Letty Wilson and Keepers did. That started as something that they produced for the Creating Comics module together. They met on the course and produced this little 10-page story, and it was so good. The vibe that they had going between one another was so good creatively that we managed to get a little bit of money together from the university and said if they can come up with another 15 or so pages, which they very gladly and quickly did, we would put it out as an issue. And so we did the first run of that, and they actually got all the creators that they'd met on the course, like Frank Whiteley and so on, and Dave Gibbons, indeed, to give them little quotes. We sent off a draft copy to them, and they give little supportive quotes, which they got on the back cover, which is quite an amazing thing to have all those people saying nice things about your comics. So they started kind of taking that to conventions and showing it to publishers, and so that's been good for them. And they're now on to they've had their second issue out, which they've published independently through Panels Comics, which is a group that formed out of some master's students based in Glasgow, and then they're now working on their third issue. So really, really happy to see that kind of thing taking off.
Yeah, I was speaking to Letty at this convention yesterday, actually. So she was telling me that she's nearing the end of issue 3. So it's great to see that kind of spin out, you know. And it's the same with Rossi Gifford, who did Spirit Leaves. So she started that when she was on the course. And now she's on issue 3 of that for Chapter House in Canada. So she lives in Toronto now. By day, she's working for an animation company doing character designs for a Nickelodeon TV show, and by night she's continuing her comics.
She has the most insane work ethic.
Exactly.
I remember when you were saying, like, yeah, she handed for the deadline, but she still had about a month to go, and she coloured everything in with a mouse and things like that. And you're like, how do you do this?
Like, I think that's really important. You've got to love what you do, but you've got to be fast. You've got to be good. You've got to be reliable, and you've got to hit deadlines. I think that's what we say to our students. You know, you could be the best artist in the world, but if you don't hit the deadlines, then you're going to struggle to get work. So you've got to have that kind of drive. You know, it's a challenge because it's a lot of work. You know, and if you are doing it around another project, or you know, you're doing 2 jobs, or you're doing 2 comics, or it's very, very demanding. You know, we're lucky that a lot of our top students have just had this incredible process, and you know, and they're able to churn the work out without compromising the quality.
Yeah, well, we've heard that when we've had, from the horse's mouth, when we've had various editors in over the years, and time and time again the message is, if you've got a choice between going for the best artist or the most reliable artist, you're going to pick the most reliable artist, because you need that deadline to be hit. So it's an important aspect of professionalisation, you know, that you've got to take out the courses as well.
Especially since it's feeding into a business as well. At the end of the day, if it doesn't come out, people might miss it. They forget about it, or it's just something that's incredibly necessary to actually get out. But like you said, it's particularly with Rossi, like, she's been incredibly successful. There's always something. If you ever followed her on anything, there's always something going up constantly. It just shows the kind of.
She's got a great profile, and her Instagram account, she's always putting work up there, sketches, which they're not really sketches, I would say. They're more advanced than that.
Yeah.
And she gets a lot of likes, and so she's built that audience up.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that's important. You can't just go to a con and put your book on the table and expect it to sell. You've got to drive the sales, and the team behind Saltire, they're very, very good at that as well. That's something that's come through the courses. Their artists are always artists who've been on our courses. So, for example, Tone, Gary Welsh, and Claire Rowe all did comics courses at the university in Dundee. And Claire Rowe has just been signed up to be the new artist on DC Comics Batgirl, Birds of Prey, which is fantastic. So we've seen that kind of transition from,
we can put this on a thing.
So she's gone from sort of anthology to Saltire artist to she went to Boom after that. She did 7 issues of a strip, a comic there, and to see that kind of rise, to fame, it's fantastic. It makes it really worthwhile.
Yeah. And not to take advantage of it, but do you have this list somewhere where you're like, okay, let's add this to the list? It's like,
well,
we're always very happy so it shouldn't succeed.
But no, it's exactly. I think that's a good point to end on as well, because it just shows the process of it and how you can really get into sort of the industry through this, and it's a much more natural transition than just sitting in your room and being, well, how do I do this? But thank you for your time, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks. Cheers. Thanks.
Why is my hand always this way?